At the beginning of the film, we see several individuals in distinctive white uniforms aboard a ship, though we are not entirely sure what they are doing there. They appear to be setting up some type of system on a device before departing. Meanwhile, at a research station, a group of scientists is studying the sudden appearance of a massive and mysterious underwater hole. The size of this anomaly is truly unsettling, enough to make everyone on the team feel a deep chill. And so, the film begins. The scene shifts to a researcher named Jimmy, who is revealed to be the son of a previous scientist. He has arrived in response to a call from the head of the company, Mr. Pickman himself. Upon getting there, Jimmy meets Dr. Goldstein, who provides guidance on analyzing certain objects and carrying out a mission unlike anything attempted before, an endeavor that will supposedly transform humanity's future, all under the banner of Pickman Corporation.
What is that? It looks almost man-made.
At Pickman Corporation, various explorers gather for a briefing regarding their upcoming assignment. We are introduced to Gordon, who serves as the head of the laboratory, Chris, a marine biologist, Jimmy, a program developer for new discoveries, Joe, a safety officer, and Hank, the chief engineer. Their team of 5 has been given a mission to retrieve something from the deepest part of the ocean. Hank has designed a submarine named Provident 3, which can withstand underwater pressure up to 37,000 feet below sea level, thus ensuring their safety during this expedition. Dr. Goldstein clarifies that this is not meant to be a high-risk operation. Primarily, they just need to collect test samples as part of the investigation into an ancient civilization believed to exist down there. Mr. Pickman himself arrives to emphasize his dedication, stating that he has devoted his life to advancing this research. Thanks to cooperative funding, he has succeeded in keeping this company operational and pioneering new frontiers.
Secrets of the ocean.
The next scene shows all 5 team members dining together, opting for meals while finalizing their plans. Chris expresses apprehension about the mission due to having a young child who is likely worried about her. But Jimmy offers reassurance, encouraging her to remain hopeful and responsible. Eventually, they reach the Pickman Corporation base in Antarctica, where the 5 explorers, along with Mr. Pickman, set sail in a smaller vessel. Upon arrival, they board the Provident 3 submarine and begin operating it. Each person takes up a specific role to ensure the mission proceeds smoothly, with Gordon managing the submarine's controls, and they all descend into the depths. Everything appears normal at first, until they reach about 10,000 feet below sea level, when they witness an astonishing sight before them. They maneuver the submarine forward, and the control base station, including Dr. Goldstein, monitors every development closely. Mr. Pickman notices a minor leak in the submarine's hull, but keeps this information to himself, for reasons unknown. He and his team also move discreetly through the submarine without alerting the others, as though he has his own agenda. Suddenly, the vessel is jolted by something, resulting in a total communication blackout. Everyone reacts with alarm. Gordon attempts to release extra weight to stabilize the submarine, but this move is halted because they are so close to whatever they have been seeking all along. Shortly after, the systems return to full functionality. They spot a huge formation and realize, to their surprise, that there is indeed a form of life down here, apparently from thousands of years ago. Moreover, they discover a large human-like skeleton. Jimmy is tasked with collecting a sample of this organism. Before he exits, Chris urges him to proceed cautiously, reminding him that the surroundings are still largely unknown. Jimmy departs in a small submersible pod, descending slowly to collect the specimen, moving at a vertical speed of about 1.4 knots. He is awestruck by the breathtaking underwater panorama, yet also catches a glimpse of a truly unsettling creature lurking in the darkness. Chris grows increasingly uneasy about Jimmy's safety. In a startling moment, something stirs on the seabed. Jimmy's vessel encounters technical issues, but he remains determined to fulfill his mission. Suddenly, a colossal being resembling a winged entity appears, dark and imposing like a reaper. It disrupts the signals by emitting powerful ultrasonic waves, causing further distress. Gordon tries to guide everyone away, but Jimmy is still outside, attempting to return to the main submarine. In the confusion, Chris accidentally falls into a flooded compartment, prompting Hank to panic. Hank manages to open the door with urgency and as much strength as he can muster, ultimately rescuing Chris. Jimmy, still outside, tries to evade the colossal creature. Chris is initially unresponsive, and Joe, the safety officer, fears that Chris has not survived. Overcome with shock, Joe stands aside while Hank searches for Mr. Pickman. Despite the chaos, Jimmy finally manages to get back into the main submarine. However, Hank is now trapped in a flooded room. Desperately, Hank calls for help from Mr. Pickman, but for some unknown reason, Pickman chooses to leave Hank trapped, ultimately leading to Hank losing his life there. Jimmy, now back in the submarine, sees Chris collapsed in a dire state. Jimmy immediately begins performing CPR with all his might, and eventually Chris regains consciousness.
You're all right.
Grateful and relieved, Chris embraces Jimmy. They gather to consider what to do next, realizing that their chances of returning safely are bleak. Abruptly, Mr. Pickman enters and instructs Joe to take the sample to the laboratory. Chris warns them not to act hastily with it, cautioning that they know nothing about this entity. Chris inspects the specimen, sensing there is something peculiar about it. On closer examination, the sample reveals tentacles, a startling and unsettling sight. Unsure of what they are dealing with, Chris decides to lock it away for safety. Elsewhere, Joe and Dr. Goldstein scheme together, willing to seize the specimen by any means necessary, irrespective of the risks to others. Joe now carries a weapon for added security, in case anyone tries to interfere. Mr. Pickman eventually shows up in the lab, marveling at the extraordinary scene before him. Overwhelmed by the discovery, Mr. Pickman begins to merge with the organism, transforming himself into a formidable mutant. Jimmy and Chris caution everyone to stay calm, noting the intense psychological strain affecting the group. Meanwhile, Gordon remains in the control room and starts hearing strange noises. Jimmy and Chris also hear frantic cries and rush to the control room. Passing the now open laboratory, they notice that invasive plant-like growths have spread everywhere. Inside, Mr. Pickman, looking extremely unwell, emits a series of intense sounds, somewhat like the echoes of whales or dolphins, so loud they hurt Jimmy's and Chris's ears with ultrasonic pressure. Suddenly, Mr. Pickman leaps into the water below. Joe then arrives, pointing his weapon at Jimmy and Chris, because his sole interest is securing the sample, while Mr. Pickman seems fixated on merging with whatever this creature is. Chris tries to reason with Joe, but Joe refuses to listen, going straight to the lab to seize the sample for further study with Dr. Goldstein. After Joe leaves, Jimmy and Chris see that Gordon too has been transformed into a mutated form and is preparing to attack them. A struggle breaks out, with Jimmy losing his footing as Gordon, now acting unpredictably, causes damage to the submarine's systems. Chris, distraught, shouts for help but is unable to do much in that moment. Joe reappears, firing his weapon recklessly at Gordon, who collapses, unable to continue. Disturbed by all that has happened, Chris turns on Joe, and a brief confrontation ensues. Using a tool in his hand, Chris manages to stop Joe, leaving him incapacitated on the floor. Chris rushes over to help Jimmy and attempts to halt the submarine's operations, hoping to find a safer option. Jimmy, however, insists on returning to the lab to destroy the alarming sample. Just then, Jimmy is momentarily distracted by a vision of his late father, which seems to haunt him. Taking advantage of Jimmy's lapse, Joe resurfaces, grappling with him fiercely. Yet Jimmy manages to gather his strength and retrieve a nearby gun. In one final move, Jimmy neutralizes Joe, freeing him from the entity's influence. As the strange parasite emerges from Joe's body, Jimmy uses his equipment to eliminate it as well. By now, the submarine is beginning to break down. Chris hastily operates a smaller escape pod, hoping to reach safety. Jimmy stays behind, his surroundings filled with echoing voices calling out to him. It is the last time we see Jimmy, left in the darkness.
You came for it. Let's go together. Together with them into the depths of oblivion.
In the final scene, Chris is shown in a hospital bed. She has been unconscious for 2 days but has somehow survived. Suddenly, Dr. Goldstein enters and scolds Chris for losing the specimen, while Chris, in obvious distress, says that everything Dr. Goldstein wants now lives inside her. The organism has clearly begun to take hold, causing Chris immense pain. With that realization, the film ends. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Because by subscribing, you have supported me to make better videos. See you in the next video.